نحن نمتلك في الإمارات رؤية طموحة لتعزيز الحلول القائمة على الطبيعة لمواجهة التغيرات المناخية، ومن أهمها التعهد بزراعة 100 مليون شجرة قرب بحلول عام 2030، وهي الأشجار اللي تعمل كخزانات طبيعية للكربون. كما تمثل سياسة الاقتصاد الدائري إطاراً شاملاً لتحديد نهج الدولة في تحقيق الحوكمة المستدامة والاستخدام الأمثل للموارد الطبيعية، حيث تتضمن أولوياتنا في هذه السياسة 4 قطاعات رئيسية، وهي البنية التحتية المستدامة، النقل المستدام، التصنيع المستدام، وأخيراً الإنتاج والاستهلاك الغذائي المستدامين.
The future of urban living is all about creating cities that are smart, efficient and sustainable. The UAE is a leader in smart city development. By using smart technologies, we can reduce our carbon footprint and make cities run sustainably. Our environmental digital solutions are playing a key role in optimizing waste, energy and mobility. The UAE is making big strides in moving towards a circular economy, focusing on sustainable waste management and waste-to-energy projects. We are proud to be part of that success in the UAE, positioning it as a sustainability leader in the region.
يلعب برنامج الإمارات لبحوث علوم الاستمطار دور حيوي في المساهمة في استدامة المياه والبيئة داخل دولة الإمارات. وأكد العلماء والباحثون في دولة الإمارات أن الاستمطار يمكن أن يزيد من معدلات هطول الأمطار بنسبة تصل إلى 25% في ظل الظروف المثالية، وبنسبة 15% في الظروف العكرة والمغبرة. وتسلط هالأرقام الضوء على قدرة الاستمطار على توفير المياه للمناطق المعرضة للجفاف بكفاءة واستدامة أكبر من التقنيات الأخرى، وبتكلفة أقل، وباستخدام مواد صديقة للبيئة.
إن التزام دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة بالاستدامة له جذور عميقة، بدءاً من رؤية الأب المؤسس المغفور له الشيخ زايد رحمة الله عليه في ترسيخ مفهوم الاستدامة كأحد أسس دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة. تعد دولة الإمارات رائدة في قطاع الطاقة المتجددة والنظيفة، حيث أقدمت على خطوات بارزة لتتقدم في هذا المجال. قد أنشأت مؤسسة مصدر في أوائل العقد الأول من القرن ال21، واستضافت مقر الوكالة الدولية للطاقة المتجددة آيرينا في أبوظبي بنجاح. ومن بين المشاريع البارزة عالمياً مجمع محمد بن راشد للطاقة الشمسية، الذي يهدف إلى إنتاج طاقة تبلغ 5000 ميجا وات حلول عام 2030، ليكون الأكبر من نوعه في العالم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سمو الشيخ ذياب بن محمد بن زايد آل نهيان، نائب رئيس ديوان الرئاسة للشؤون التنموية وأسر الشهداء، سمو الشيوخ، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الضيوف الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اسمحوا لي بداية بالتعريف عن نفسي. معكم عمر عبد الله الهاشمي، الرئيس التنفيذي لقطاع النقل والتوزيع في شركة أبوظبي الوطنية للطاقة طاقة، ويشرفني اليوم أن أتولى مهمة إدارة هذا الحوار في هذا المجلس الموقر. في إطار الاحتفاء بمرور 40 عاماً على إقامة العلاقات الإماراتية الصينية، يستضيف مجلس محمد بن زايد الخبير تشارلز لو، المدير المؤسس لمركز الصين والعالم في جامعة سيتي في ماكاو، وذلك لتقديم محاضرة بعنوان التكنولوجيا الخضراء، الطريق نحو مستقبل مستدام. ستركز محاضرتنا اليوم على التكنولوجيا الخضراء بوصفها أحد أهم الوسائل المساعدة على التحول من الوقود الأحفوري إلى مصادر الطاقة المتجددة لضمان مستقبل مستدام. كما سيستعرض تشارلز إسهامات وجهود الصين في مسيرة التحول نحو الاقتصاد منخفض الكربون. وأود أن ألفت إلى عنايتكم الكريمة إلى أن المحاضرة ستكون باللغة الإنجليزية، وبإمكانكم استخدام السماعات لمتابعة الترجمة الفورية. واسمحوا لي الآن بأن أتحدث باللغة الإنجليزية. Your Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this lecture at Majlis Mohammed bin Zayed, entitled Green Technology Plus, Towards a Future of Sustainable Development. This lecture is organized in celebration of 40 years of relations between the UAE and China. It gives me great pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, Charles Liu, the founding director of the Center of China and the World at City University of Macau. He served in various capacities in the United Nations, principally in leading economic negations. He also served as Secretary of G77 developing countries for 3 years. Charles, may I kindly ask you to begin your lecture?
Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really honored to be here, especially on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of this establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the UAE, to address the issue of green tech. I'm honored also because less than a year ago, COP28 was held successfully here in the UAE, and that's where the leaders of the world and the elite in the sector came and gathered to address this critical issue, the issue which will impact the rest of the world for many, many decades to come. It will even involve whether or not the Earth will survive. Look at that chart. Even though 127 countries committed to improving their performance in carbon emissions, this is what we see. Continued deterioration of the situation. This is weather anomalies, and it's very, very dangerous where we're headed. And this is not just one country, because it's the whole Earth that's impacted. This is the weather anomaly chart. And this is the number of deaths chart. But this is the significant part too, for developing countries especially, the amount of money that is lost because of weather problems or climate issues. And makes it very, very difficult for developing countries to continue to develop and improve their livelihood of their people if weather continues to take away from the wealth of the earth. Let me just start by talking about outlook for green technology. There are two sides to technology. One side is the demand side, one is the supply side. In terms of demand for energy, it's increasing all the time, and it's increasing, as you know very well, much faster than people had projected for a number of reasons. One major reason is developing countries need to grow, and to grow, you need to have electricity. That's on the demand side. On the supply side, there's an issue of whether or not new and renewable sources of green energy can continue to meet where the demand is. It's very, very difficult to meet the demand as it stands now, but to meet the demand that is forthcoming, that is continuing to grow, some in astronomical growth levels, for example, which we will touch on later, on AI, for example, the demand on power will be incredible. So on the supply side of electricity, 40% are still by fuel, and still a significant portion is contributing to the impact on the CO2 emissions. Now, what has happened with new renewable sources of energy is that wind, solar are the biggest contributors to new and renewable deployment worldwide. And in this regard, there is good news because of what happened in China. Solar is now a significant portion of the energy supply in China. Over 37% now of China's energy is new and renewable, and the bulk of it is solar. This is a chart of solar making up 75% of new and renewables worldwide. And China is a major contributor in this. You can see with this chart, the red being China, of course, in terms of contribution. And also in 2023, both wind and solar installations in China increased by 50%. So it's continuing to grow. What happened in the process that is significant is China, because of the market size, creates economies of scale and supply chain, allowing China to produce all the new and renewable equipment at a fraction of the cost of elsewhere. We have a situation in which the price of solar is now cheaper than coal, and the price of solar is now 90% reduction from what it was 10 years ago. So it becomes available to anyone and everyone. It is hoped that in China, by 2028, 60% of new energy supply requirements will be through new and renewables. You can see utility scale solar and wind power capacity of the top 10 countries. China is the majority, it's the bulk of it. So I think it's recognized by all that China has the capacity to produce this at a very cheap price so that it could be used by the rest of the world and contribute to reducing carbon emissions for everyone. This is what's happening with solar and wind. Wind is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This propeller is 19 tons. And moving it about is not easy around mountains and so on. But it's the most efficient wind blade that exists now and is now widely used in China. So two things. One is it's getting bigger and bigger. The solar farms are getting bigger too. Solar farms are 1 gigawatt to start, and now they're talking about even more than that. Ladies and gentlemen, 1 gigawatt means 1.5 million panels. Think about what that means in terms of building, constructing, and maintaining. I have some stories to tell about that will be interesting. So they're getting bigger is one thing. The other thing is they're getting smarter. Internet of Things allows data to flow, and AI allows data to be analyzed and studied, and circumstances and situation to be analyzed like in never before ways. And then this is mixed energy. Wind turbines, especially offshore, have a problem in terms of transmitting it onto shore because it's pretty far off the shore. And the undersea cables are expensive and difficult to lay out. So what China has done is developed a combined system of wind and hydrogen. What you see there is something that could be moved about. It's a hydrogen generator without using fresh water. Using seawater can produce hydrogen cleanly. And then it becomes wind power converted to hydrogen. Wind power converted to hydrogen means that it could be stored and transported. This was actually successfully tested in July of this year. So we have new renewables getting bigger, smarter, and multifaceted, combination use of different technologies. I won't get into details on hydrogen energy because it's probably not going to be really significant within the near future. But there are a number of studies which indicated countries are beginning to look at hydrogen more seriously as a means of safe transport and storage. So potentially there could be about $500 billion worth of investment in about 5 to 7 years. But it could be seen as a really good transitory or intermediate term solution. Now this is the interesting one. Nuclear fusion. As you can see in the chart, that this is a test, laboratory test in Shanghai. And we're talking about 120 million degrees centigrade power being generated for over 400 seconds. Now the test has improved on previous records of 100 seconds, 150 seconds, and so on and so forth. Fusion is basically, I guess the only way to describe it is a mini sun on Earth. And this is ultimately going to be the most efficient, the cheapest, and probably the only true pollution-free generator of power. There is a lot of progress, but there are no clearly delineated scientific route to addressing the technological and engineering issues that have to be addressed. It will probably take another 10 years before this is all defined. So within the next 10 years, the other means are still more important. But scientifically, it's China and Europe which are most advanced in fusion technology development. Now I'd like to address a few green technologies plus key issues. For transition from fossil fuel to new and renewable sources of energy will lead to a lot of issues. Competition. We see the competition for fossil fuel, and we will see competition for minerals that's required for new and renewables. We'll see competition for supply chains for new and renewables. We'll see competition worldwide for control over the distribution and production of new and renewables. Ultimately, in this context, I think there are two issues that I think are significant that has to be addressed. That is fairness and justice. Developed countries have been developing for a long time, have been emitting CO2 for a long time, and has been polluting the air that is impacting the rest of the world for a long time. Now, you can see this from this chart, how much has been pumped into the air by the developing nations, and in recent years by China. This is one reason why China is working very hard on promoting new renewable sources of energy. This is figures for the top CO2 emitting countries from 1750 industrial revolutions begin and to 2021. G7 countries caused 44.6% of all human-caused CO2 emissions. And there is a responsibility of the developed countries to address this issue with nuclear power plants, with new and renewables. So I think it's important in terms of fairness and justice and fairness for developing countries to receive support from the major developed countries in promoting new and renewable sources of energy that can help them develop and have sustainable development. Current climate funding is really insufficient. There have been a lot of commitments by developed countries. So I think this is something that should be brought to the attention to the rest of the world. And COP28 certainly has done that. And I think this will continue to happen. Again, sorry to talk about China so much, but China is very big in this sector. China is very big in this sector. In every aspect of new and renewables, China is a leading player. And the reason is very simple, of course, because China's market size, its economies of scale, and the most important part is government focus, policy focus, and government drive toward improving their carbon emissions. I have some examples of how the Chinese government has done it. For those of you who might have gone to China 10 or 15 years ago, you will recall that Beijing was a city under a haze. Remember the concept of PM 2.5? The pollution that was in Beijing that was horrendous and hopeless? In 3 years, everything cleaned out. Skies were blue. And air was clean. How did they do it? Government commitment to do it, they did it. There are several ways. One is to change all coal-fired power plants to gas. That's one. Second is homes that were using coal for heating changed to gas. So for a while there was shortage of gas in China, and a lot of LNG had to be imported. But when people get used to it, they think and they realize that it's a lot better to use gas. And the other part that was really good was that education. People were educated, were told about what caused this PM 2.5 pollution, and young people started to look out for cleaner solutions, and people started to do engineering studies on pollution reduction and pollution control. So I think education is a very significant portion of what goes into a society to move toward a greener future. This is a story that I want to tell that is now reality. We have a situation in which China is moving heavily into solar, and the solar power plants are getting bigger and bigger. As I mentioned before, 1 gigawatt is 1.5 million panels. Now, if you have panels, they have to be maintained. They have to be maintained how? To make sure that it doesn't crack, or there are cracks which have to be solved, and then the chips inside are still functioning properly, the wires inside are not broken. But for things which are sitting out in the air with water, rain, with sun, with sand possibly, of course things will crack, things will go wrong. As my friend here knows, if one cracks seriously, the entire line stops producing. The whole row of panels stops producing. And that's very significant in terms of efficiency of production of electricity for solar panels. So in China, talk about ingenious solutions. They found a way of doing this without having to have people with a monitor checking one panel by one panel. 1.5 million panels takes a long time to check. They're using drones. And the drones will flash a near-infrared light on the panels and take a photo. And then using AI, they can decipher which panels are in what shape. Are they okay? And then immediately they can address the defunct panel, the panel that is having problems. So, in addition to new and renewable sources of energy, drones, AI, these are things that are all contributing to improve the situation in the sector. I think this is something that really should be spread as broadly as possible worldwide, because from what I know, in the Middle East, the building of large-scale solar farms are more prevalent than micro-scale or distributed. And that means if you don't maintain them properly, then you're wasting your money. I prepared some other things on China, but I don't think I should talk about China much more. But the only thing that I would like to talk about in this context. Oh, this is an interesting slide. I forgot about this slide. Solar farms. This is in Ningxia province. It is a Gobi Desert. It is a desert condition. Because of the solar farm, wind supply, the amount of wind was reduced by 50%. So as a result, grass started to grow. And grass, when dried up, becomes very dangerous to fire. So what happens? They started raising sheep or goats to eat the grass. So now this solar farm actually has 20,000 goats. So the farmers around are actually very, very happy that this is possible. I think there are a couple of things on the horizon which are significant. I think it's important to think about what China can do for the rest of the world in this context. I have a story to tell about that, speaking to a very senior OAU official. He talked about the growth of Africa in the last decade. And he said, Charles, we have to thank Shenzhen. I said, what? Thank Shenzhen. Why Shenzhen? He said, the last 10 years, Africa developed very quickly. One reason is because of the development of smartphones. Smartphones, meaning Huawei and ZTE building out the 4G network in Africa. And the suppliers of Shenzhen, because of their manufacturing capacity, was able to produce cell phones, smartphones, for $45 a piece for Africa. Now, why is that significant? Because Africans, 90% of them didn't have bank accounts. They couldn't do financial transactions. But with smartphones, they were able to do financial transactions. They were able to do information flows and contacts and study more about the rest of the world. So he said, Shenzhen is able to do this, and it's been very helpful to Africa. And I'm hoping that in new and renewable sources of energy, same thing could happen. Same thing could happen where China's economies of scale and manufacturing prowess could help the rest of the world in the same way. I call this the Chinese way of bringing everybody in through abundance instead of keeping people out through scarcity. For UAE, I think UAE has abundance of capital, especially long-term capital. And UAE also has something which I think is really sorely needed in a lot of countries, that is a vision. Looking at what UAE has done in the sector of AI, which is something that we've been following very, very closely in China as well, it is definitely a country where the leadership has vision and is looking forward to innovation at the very tip of the pyramid. And I hope UAE can work with China in this context. You have deployable capital, but even more than that, your investments have given you a lot of IP rights. And this IP rights, if you leave it in the laboratories, it doesn't do very good, doesn't do very much good. But if it's combined with China's manufacturing prowess and its capacity to deliver to the rest of the world, I think will be very, very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, for this eye-opening lecture. Actually, when you talked about robotics, you reminded me with a visit I did to Abuظbي, which is one of the largest solar plants in the world, where I actually saw these robotics working in action. Based on your experience, Charles, what is the role of the regulators? And what are the critical policies that will empower both private and public sector to proactively seek more sustainable solutions?
I think regulators are actually just putting together rules for people to follow and make sure people follow them. The role of the regulator is actually implementing the strategic decisions of the government's leadership. That's much more important. The strategic vision, the strategic plan is the one that makes the difference. And the regulator is basically just to implement and follow these things. And this is how it has been in China and has been successful therefrom.
It is about leadership, indeed.
Yeah, it is about top leadership.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charles, for this engaging conversation. In conclusion, our lecture has covered the vital role of green technology that plays into sustainable development, how it significantly contributes to technology advancements, how it addresses global environmental challenges, and how it helps in the creation of a greener and smarter cities. This lecture also covered China's effort and contribution to green technologies. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to His Highness Sheikh Diab bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan for graciously hosting this event. I'd like to thank Charles Liu for his valuable and insightful lecture. I would also like to thank our esteemed audience for your kind presence. And now I would like to invite Your Highness and the participants of today's video to join us in the stage for a group photo.